A pimp, not a simp. A pimp, not a simp. A pimp, not a simp. We eat so many shrimp. I got iodine partners.
My bitch a choosy lover, never fuck without a rubber. Never in the sheets like it on top of the cover. Money on the dresser, drive a compressor. Top notch hoes get the most, not the lesser. Trash like the fuck with $40 in the club. Fucking up the game, bitch, it gets no love. She be cross country, giving all that she got.
I'm watching the screen
pulling
on my
bitches off the
laptop.
lot. I smashed up the gray one, bought me a red. Every time we hit the parking lot, we turn head. Some hoes wanna choose, but them bitches too scary. Your bitch chose me, you ain't a pimp, you a fairy.
A pimp, not a simp. A pimp, not a simp. A pimp, not a simp. We eat so many shrimp. I got iodine partners.
Baby, you been rolling solo, time to get down with the team. The grass is greener on that other side, if you know what I mean. I show you shit you never seen, the 7 wonders of the world. And I can make you the 8 if you wanna be my girl. I say my girl, I don't mean my woman, that ain't my style. Need a real street stalker to walk a green mile. You piling up the paper on the dining room table, cause you able to realize I'm the truth and not a fable. Baby, rockin' Russian sable, keep that chiller on the rack. What I look like with some $1,000 shit up on my back. I'm $1 million man, they need $1 billion bitch. Put my pimpin' in your life, watch your daddy get rich. Easy as ABC, simple as 1, 2, 3. Get down with UGK, Pimp CBU with B. Cause what's a hoe with no pimp, and what's a pimp with no hoe? Don't be a lame, you know the game and how it goes. We try to get chose.
A pimp, not a simp. A pimp, not a simp. A pimp, not a simp. We eat so many shrimp. I got iodine partners.
I'm still muted. There you go. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Artie's Corporate Fiction. I have a great show tonight. Look at me, acting like I have a podcast or something. Thank you guys for joining in. Tonight, we have a guest for another one of my conversations and discussions. This is Rogue Nation. He's a First Amendment auditor. He approached me about a couple of weeks ago, I think, before Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving break, offering to have a one-to-one. I, of course, agreed, and we are just going to have a conversation. This is not intended to be a debate. It's not intended to be something rigorous as that. It's meant to be a one-to-one, casual affair, talking about a variety of topics. So I will go ahead and let you introduce yourself, Rogue, and then we can get right to it.
Oh, thank you very much, Artie. All right, guys, I'm Rogue Nation. I'm out of Central Florida. I've been doing First Amendment audits for about 2 years now.
Okay, so we before we got on, before we went live, we had a couple of discussions, we discussed a couple of the topics that we wanted to talk about, and I think we both agreed on the first one. So I'll let you get the ball rolling, and we can go from there.
Okay, Artie. Well, as you know, as a First Amendment auditor, a lot of the situations I deal with are on public property. Specifically city halls, county jail lobbies, things of that nature, non-restricted areas of public buildings. And a lot of the flack I get from people on the internet is that we're not allowed into these public areas recording. Now, my stance on that is pretty simple. Historically, the right to free press has been, the constitutional importance of the free press has been to keep an eye on our public servants in order to make sure what they're doing is right and noble. And if not, to bring that information to other citizens, disseminate that information to other citizens so they can make wise choices on who's, running their city or county, state, national governments, and how they're spending their money. Another aspect of it is that the Supreme Court specifically has stated that the right to free press or excuse me, that the press doesn't have any more access than the general public does. So logically, that would say to me that wherever the general public's allowed, a member of the free press would be allowed as well. That is my take on that. What would you say about my take on that? Is that
Well, you had two. You're going through two different subjects. First of all, you had your first one was dealing with the right to record in public spaces such as city halls and police departments, etc. But then you also wanted to talk about the specifics about the free press and the whether or not a free press, a member of the media has any more rights, or the press has any more rights than the average citizen. So, to answer your second question, I agree with you in that the media does not have any more constitutional liberties than the regular citizenry does. So, in that respect, you're correct there. In speaking generally, that the media does not get special access that the public generally would not be able to have. The manner in which the distinctions that they're going to be made, they cannot be made based on whether or not somebody is press or official member of the press, because I've already read a couple of cases where the court has already said that especially in today's world, defining who is and isn't a member of the press is a very risky situation because of the vagueness of the defining term. In other aspects, such as I've also seen it in other avenues of discussion in terms of litigation, in terms of, say, for instance, a defamation suit, then defining who is and is not press might be more relevant. But in terms of overall, constitutional access, the courts do not reach that kind of argument of trying to define who is and is not a member of the press.
right? Because I mean, under their definition, wouldn't anybody that has a story of public interest and a means to disseminate that story, I mean, isn't that? I mean, that's literally encompassing bloggers, YouTubers. I mean, anybody with a story, and again, public interest is whatever the public's interested in. So no one man can say, well, this is a public interest or this isn't a public interest, because the public itself chooses what it's interested in. Just like you go on YouTube and you see, 3 million views on Ryan opening toys. That's obviously of public interest. 3 million members of the public found that interesting. Whereas you could be doing a story on police corruption and only 10,000 people watch that. Both of them are still
let me
public interest.
Well, let me say this. Well, you say Ryan opening toys. It's that video is a matter of the public interest. But how about disseminating Ryan's home address? Is that a member of the part of the public interest?
I mean, no, not unless he was doing it himself. I would assume for whatever reason that he found reasonable to disseminate that information. I mean, obviously, our addresses.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because there are, especially in light of certainly in a defamation case I was looking at a couple days ago, the court had to talk about whether or not this individual was protected or had an affirmative defense on what he was disseminating. And part of the analysis was, yes, what did he do that would define him as a member of the press, number one. Number two, whether what he was doing was a part of the public interest. So, I'll give you briefly the details of the case, was that this person was disseminating somebody's criminal record publicly. This individual, and the court held that this individual was not letting themselves out into the public, and the evidence in the record was clearly establishing that this individual who was spreading this person's criminal record was doing so not as a member of the public interest, but as somebody who had a vendetta against that individual. So I guess my point is that
Right,
I don't think your definition of the public interest is as broad as you seem to think it is.
Okay, I can live with that.
So going back to we have some understanding on in terms of media, members of the press, and the public. So in segueing that back to the issue of public buildings, I agree with you in the respect that the members of the press do not have special access or the same special access as the members of the public do, but that works both ways, right? So if the public can't access it, the media can't. If the media can't access it, the public can't, right? So if a city hall, or let's say a police department says you can't record here while you're here, they're not saying it just to you. They're saying it to anybody, and that would include any News Channel 5 with a giant video camera if they're recording in a public place without initially getting consent from an agent of the facility, right?
So you're saying that this public lobby where the public can go into, that the press would need permission to go into?
Not permission to go into, permission to record.
Well, right. Well, how else would like a video journalist gather content?
I'm sorry. They cannot write down notes on their story. Or are you saying that the only way of being able to hold public officials accountable is through video?
Well, I'm not saying that's the only way, but that is definitely a more objective way. I mean, you could stand in there all day with a pen and a paper and write whatever you want
and ask questions, right?
Right. And then you could, go out front and set up your video camera and say, again, whatever you want. And then it's kind of up to the viewer whether you're telling the truth or not, because they have to take your word that what you wrote down was actually what happened. Whereas with a video camera, it's an objective record. I mean, it's there. It's what happened. There's no his side of the story, my side of the story. It is what it is.
Okay. But that your view that the visual or audio recording or video recording is a better way doesn't mean that it's therefore you're supposed to or you're allowed to, right? They get the facility can still say you can't record here, and that can apply to members of the press. It doesn't inhibit the members of the press. It just means that you're not getting the medium that you want or that you would prefer.
Right, I understand, but I didn't realize that free press was restricted to only certain forms. I mean, if that's the case, wouldn't it be restricted to pen and quill or quill and paper?
Are you saying that there's no difference between, what the avenues of audio and video recording in a public facility is no different than pen and paper?
What I'm saying is as time goes on, we realize that there's other ways to capture this content, and saying that this way of capturing content we can restrict, but we can allow this kind of capturing content. I mean, that would seem sort of almost like discrimination, wouldn't it?
Not really. I don't think
Like
there's
if two reporters showed up at the police station lobby, one guy had a pen and a paper, the other guy had a camera. They let the guy in with the pen and the paper, but not the camera. That wouldn't be discrimination.
No.
Okay.
I don't know why you would think that'd be discrimination, because the restriction is on the tool,
It wouldn't be like the
not
unequal
not on the
application.
individual. The restriction is on the
So
device, not the individual.
okay, and that wouldn't be like an unequal application of, you know what I mean? Like
No, because most people are
that
also.
would just seem like an unequal application of the law there.
I don't know why you would say that's an unequal application of the law, because again, the restriction is no audio and video recording. And again, I'm only giving a hypothetical because states have their own different rules on recording in public areas. But in the hypothetical, saying that that you can only record audio and video without consent, or without the consent first receiving permission. Let's say courthouse, for example. You know, then the restriction is on the device. It's not a restriction on the press. And the fact that you or some member of the media prefers the use of a video or camera isn't discrimination, because it's a restriction on the tool.
Okay. Okay, great. So now what you're saying is if I go into, let's say, City Hall, they've got a sign up. You know, what is it? An ordinance? Let's say they got an ordinance that says no video or audio recording in the City Hall. They ask me to leave because I'm recording. You're saying then I could be trespassed from City Hall and possibly arrested? Would that be right?
Yes.
That would be correct.
Generally speaking,
And
yes.
That would be like a lawful arrest. Is that on any public property?
It's well, again, that's dependent upon the local and state laws, but the courts have already stated that, you know, just because property is owned by the government does not mean, you know, everybody has free and open access to it, and that even includes, you know.
Talking about Adderley.
I'm sorry.
You talking about Adderley?
Adderley? I'm referring to, where did I have that? Coquinda.
Okay.
U.S. versus Coquinda, 497 U.S. 720.
Okay. Well, the reason why I was asking is because I have been arrested and in those situations and had the charges dismissed. And again, let me ask you, just, it's not a legal question, but just, you know, what you would think. Would there be a right to free press if, let's say, journalists with video cameras had to stand outside of being, you know, the city offices, like when Smith v. Cummings said to the right to, you know, film our public officials in the course of their public duties? Did you think that the 11th Circuit thought that, like, a city clerk's duty was walking from her car to the building?
No. That'd be something different.
Okay, so how would I film the city clerk in the performance of her duties if they just could throw up a sign that said no video?
Because that's the state also has, or the courts have already given them the little latitude of being able to put time, place, and manner restrictions on being able to record public officials in the course of their duties. And you can also you can also have the ability to monitor your public officials without the use of a video camera and without the use of an audio recording device. Or in many instances, you may be able to have an audio device. But
Smith v. Cummings specifically says filming, correct?
Smith versus Cummings said that subject to the police conduct.
Well, it used the words public officials, not police.
It says police here.
It doesn't say we have the right to record our public officials in the course of their public duties and matters of public interest.
I see here As to the quote, as to the First Amendment claim under Section 1983, we agree with the Smiths that they had a First Amendment right, subject to reasonable time, manner, and place restrictions, to photograph or videotape police conduct. First Amendment protects the right to gather information about what public officials do on public property, and specifically a right to record matters of public interest. So, a right to record matters of public interest. Well, one of the examples that they gave was the plaintiff's interest in filming public meetings, that the videotape, like state law on videotaping public meetings. But what exactly does a court clerk doing? Is that, are you saying that the court clerk accepting visitors is equivalent to a public meeting?
No, I'm saying that the very essence of the free press was the right to watch over our public officials, how they act, how they behave. As a matter of fact, in the Continental Congress letter to the inhabitants of Quebec in 1774, the Continental Congress stated that it was the right to free press was the right to shame our public officials into doing what was noble, because of course even back then the corruption was out of hand, and they understood that only when a man's actions are brought before the public bar that he will correct his actions or make his actions noble, because in darkness is when bad stuff happens. That's why we have to bring stuff to the light. So that's why the free press was invented, was specifically to watch government. It wasn't for, Kim Kardashian and the New York Giants and anything other at that time, pretty much, than to watch the government. Specifically as we had just broken away from a government that wasn't watched closely enough, right?
I'm not disputing that part of the free press, or one of the central principles behind the free press, is to hold our public officials to account. That does not mean that they're, again, the courts have already said that not everything is absolutely right. Thanks, Sean. Should have turned that off. Anyway, as I was saying, the First Amendment is always, as I think you would agree, that the First Amendment, or none of the sections in the First Amendment are absolute, and that would include with the right to a free press, correct? So that all, you already see in the course that there is time, place, and manner restrictions are accountable on parts of the on issues of the free press, and Smith versus Cumming explicitly said that.
Right. Now, and I got a question for you. I'm hoping you can answer it. What are those time, place, manner restrictions, and where's the legal authority that fleshes them out? Like, what's the case law that fleshes out those time, place, and manner restrictions, and what are they? Like, for
that
example,
would be. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
I would say that would be about 50 years of precedent, because a lot of the issues involving time, place, and manner deal with case-by-case situations. So a lot of that is through a lot of judicial precedent, because, as you stated, time, place, and manner can mean a lot of things depending on the context. So permitting for a public gathering, permitting for a march, restricting a political campaign or political campaigning near a public building. Those are examples of time, place, and manner restrictions that are fleshed out, continue to be fleshed out by the courts, every day. So I couldn't really answer that question for you, because the answer is an entire embodiment of precedent and case law.
Well, let me try something on here for you and see what you think. And this is my thoughts on the time, place, and manner restrictions for not only, free press recording in a public area like a building, but also even for the citizens, for time, place, and manner for stuff like trespassing charges, or free speech outside, like in Adderley, where they were blocking the jail driveway late at night. So I'm thinking the time restriction would be when the general public would be allowed. Like for me, as a video in City Hall, a time restriction for me would be whenever it's open to the general public. That would be a time restriction for me. I wouldn't be allowed to come there and video at a time when the general public was not allowed to be there.
Because they're afraid of being held
A
accountable.
manner
P.
restriction would
Barnes.
be in such a manner that I didn't impede business or cause a disruption. And a place restriction would be, again, somewhere where the general public would be allowed to be, like in a non-restricted area. Would that sound like a good synopsis, I guess you could say, there, of the time, place, manner restrictions given to somebody recording in a public building?
I mean, that's fine if that's what you feel that would be an accurate or an appropriate, time, place, and manner restriction when it comes to recording. That's fine. I mean, that is something that you can argue, and you can advocate for, correct?
Well, right, because again, it's going based on the Supreme Court case where they said that the press has no more greater access than the general public. See, I'm thinking if the general public can go into, let's say, City Hall, like let's say I'm a member of the general public and I got those new spy glasses on that have the video camera inside and you can't even tell. And I can go into City Hall and public places and I can gather information. And you guy, the NBC2 guy with the video camera, he can't come in because he's got a camera. So why would I need the free press when the citizens can go and access more information than the press can because they got a camera?
Well, I think you already solved your own dilemma, right? I mean, the guy with the camera still has to have the News 2, NBC2 still would need to have permission to be able to record. If they're in a courthouse or wanting to record some news story in a courthouse, they would need prior authorization in order to be able to film. Whereas if you have those, X-ray specs or Google Glass, and the official's none the wiser, then you're able to get away with it.
Right, but I'm not talking about a courthouse. I'm talking about City Hall, where
courthouse, City Hall. I mean, the courthouse has open lobbies just the same as the City Hall does. The restriction is still there.
Well, not here in Florida. It's a little bit different. So some courthouses, you can't even go into the courthouse with a video camera. And in some districts down here, you can go into the courthouse with a camera. You just can't go into the courtroom. And
right, I understand that many vicinages, like in New Jersey, for example, the administrative judge has a far more discretion, just as it sounds like with Florida, to have their rules in terms of video recording and video recording access. Yeah. Right.
Well, the Supreme Court of Florida pretty much stated cameras are allowed in the courtroom unless you can prove it's to the detriment of the defendant or, what have you not, obviously, and obviously sex crimes and, stuff of that nature. So they're a little bit more lenient. I've been able to get into a couple of courtrooms. But yeah, let's.
I mean, well, that's fine. I mean, I understand that. I know in New Jersey, it's a bit more restrictive here. I know that in New Jersey, it's generally speaking that it's restricted unless you make an application. I know in other jurisdictions, in what was that? I think Arizona, that you have to make a request, and in general, the court should allow it. And if they do not allow it, they have to, explain or make an explicit basis for why they wouldn't allow the video recording in a courtroom. So it's different depending on which state that you're in. But yeah. So, I mean, I didn't know if you wanted to move on to a different topic or not. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, yeah, we pretty much covered that aspect of it, and we can move on maybe to something else. I picked the first one. I'll let you pick the second.
Okay, what was the, I had it off the top of my head, and I can't remember it. 1 second. Shoot.
There's a Gary W. posted, when you abuse a right, you can sometimes lose a right. Did you want to maybe go on the civil right, natural right, and
Oh, sure. Yeah, we can do that. I think that's what it was. There we go. Perfect. So, how do you? So, are you? So, I guess to start off with that, you know, what would you say is the difference between a natural right and a civil right?
a natural right is something that you are born with that is given to you by either your creator or by nature, whichever ideology you subscribe to. But a natural right is something that the government doesn't give you, and you have no need to wait for government to be set up in order to exercise it. I tell people to understand their natural rights, to imagine themselves alone on a deserted island, what rights they would be afforded, if they had two legs to travel, if they had a voice box to speak, if they had hands to defend themselves. So
Okay, then. So then, what is a civil right?
a civil right is a right granted by government through either law or legislature that is given to the members of the society when they enter society and trade their natural rights.
And they wait. They how is a civil right a trade off of a natural right? I guess. Well, the first question I would ask, and then you can maybe answer the second that question is, can you give me an example of what is a natural right?
The right to defend yourself.
Okay. That's it. Like I mean, and what I mean by that um, is it generally speaking like any action against you, or are you talking about physical harm or any kind of harm?
Well, yeah, the right to defend yourself, like physically. It gets mixed up today with the right to bear arms. Well, you know, the rights that we have here today as Americans are given to us by our government. There was no First Amendment right before the United States Constitution, and the First Amendment was penned in the Bill of Rights. You can look back through colonial case law, you can look back through English case law, you can look back through Roman case law. No First Amendment there. You know what I mean? The First Amendment isn't a natural right. It isn't a right that you were born into the world with. Most of the Bill of Rights are rights that are only present in society. The right to a trial of your peers, the right to a speedy trial, the right not to quarter troops. Again, if you're alone on a desert island, you don't have any of these rights. Okay. If you're in China, you don't have these rights. Okay. So if it's natural to all men and women. In law, when you say men, you mean men and women. These rights, natural rights, are natural to everybody. You don't have to fight for them. You don't have to march for them. There's no women's suffrage for the right to speak. If you have a voice box, you have the right to speak. So and no government implants a voice box in us at birth. That comes to us naturally. So that would again be a natural right.
So a judge putting a gag order would be an infringement on your natural right?
No, it would be an infringement upon your civil right because I talked to you a little bit, or I mentioned about the social contract, perhaps talking about it, but according to Elements of Civil Government by Peterman, 1891, when men enter society, they trade their natural rights for civil rights. So our natural right to speak is switched out for the First Amendment right to free speech. And as a civil right given to us by the government, legislated, it can be restricted. No yelling fire in a theater, and such as that.
So okay, so then I guess I'm confused as to what you then say. You say the ability to speak is a natural right, and then that you're also saying that the right to defend yourself is a natural right, but these are things that can be curtailed. These are things that can be restricted, but now you're saying that because they can be curtailed, they're no longer natural rights. Then if they could be curtailed, then they weren't natural rights to begin with, right?
Well, right, but I mean, you do agree with the social contract, right? You do agree with the concept of the social contract?
Yes.
Okay, so in a contract, there's obligations and there's rights, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so like I'll use a perfect example that I love to use. You know, when there wasn't very many societies and men were wandering in the woods, whenever somebody stole from them, they were allowed in natural law to punish that person that stole from them, say chop off their hand. You know, you obviously couldn't kill a person for doing a petty crime because that again would be a violation of the natural law, their rights, because it's a petty crime. So let's say you just chop off the guy's hand or finger or whatever you felt was, you know, just punishment for stealing your Snickers bar. But that's how men outside of society would handle it back in the day. So as you're a man outside of society back in the day, and you come upon a village, okay, you got the castle and all the huts, and you say, this is a great society, I would like to join. And they say, well, okay, well, outside of society, you were allowed to punish people who wronged you. But here in society, we already have a justice system set up. So you can no longer exercise your right to punish people however you want, and you have to submit them to our justice system for punishment. That's part of becoming a member of our society. Also, you can't just, you know, go around with your gun or your archery bow or whatever. You have to put those in the stockade. And you know, and you have a right to bear arms, but only in the defense of the citizens. You don't have a right to, you know, the natural right to defend yourself and have that by your side at all times. I mean, I'm sure you probably realize that you know, the citizens of Chicago, all being American citizens, had the right to the Second Amendment, but yet for 30 years they were not allowed to buy guns, right? So, I mean, it's
Well,
like
that
staring at us in the
well, I
face
think
all the time.
well, I think that goes into part of the issue that I have with your first initial natural right of defending yourself. Well, you say that's a full natural right. Well, I mean, I don't know if I would call it a natural right because I mean, you say you have the right to defend yourself, but does that mean that you have the full access of any means to defend yourself? So whether it be your fists or your firearms, or you know, a baseball bat, or your car, or
Well, yeah, I mean, whatever at the time was available. I mean, rights have, you know, the rights that we have today have matured over time. These civil rights, you know, with the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Civil Rights and such as that. But
right.
these rights that we have today have you know, modified over time. But you know, when we're talking back then, when there wasn't society, you know what I mean? When, you know, let's just start out, we're cavemen now. You know what I mean? We're cavemen. Okay. So what rights did cavemen have? Well, if you're a caveman and you came up and punched another caveman and he's got fists, he naturally has a right to defend himself. He doesn't need to wait until government gets set up. He doesn't need to wait until they pass legislation that says you have the right to pick up this rock next to you and hit the guy over the head, or, you know, pick up a stick
Well,
that's next to you, or
I don't know if the guy was
sharpen that stick.
I don't know if that well, I mean, if you're going to go back to the caveman era, yeah, the guy may have the right to defend himself, but if he's physically weaker than the attacker, then he's kind of SOL, isn't he?
Not if he's got a, you know, a 4-foot log behind his back.
Or if the attacker is also attacking in a group and it's just one of them.
Right. So we
Well,
realize that
so my point
as a society.
So my point is your natural right to defend yourself doesn't really mean much in caveman era if you are physically weaker or are outnumbered. And so
Absolutely.
I would say, and if that's the case, and if that's the situation we're at, I would much rather go with the social contract and convert my natural rights to civil rights, because if I'm physically weaker than most others, I'll at least have a fighting chance because I'll have the backing of the greater society with institutions that can enforce my right to defend myself, or can enforce my right to have retribution, or restitution, or justice for being wrongfully attacked.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And that's exactly why societies were formed, was because back then it was might, it was right by might. Like you said, if you're the bigger caveman, you got the bigger club, chances are you're going to be taking up all the property. So that's how the social contract even came into being, was they were like, hey, we can't defend ourselves. We can't plow the fields during the day and then fight off attacks from neighboring tribes at night. We need some kind of contract in there, and that's exactly what happened. They traded in their natural rights for civil rights, the rights of society, the rights that everybody in society agreed to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's like the civil rights we have today. These rights are rights that everyone has agreed to. Okay, and being civil, which the word civil is from civil government, which is government. It's not natural society. And because these laws come to us, again, through law, through legislation,
Mm-hmm.
okay, the Constitution is nothing but legislation. Okay, it's not some, magical form that materialized out of some kind of dirt or something. It's legislation.
Right.
And that's where our First Amendment right comes from. So if it comes to us legislatively through the government, then it just seems to be common sense that the government can restrict those rights.
Okay.
Even take them away or enlarge them, because when you come to think about it, when the Constitution was written, who enjoyed those rights? White landowners.
Right.
So they have enlarged the rights for American citizens since even the Constitution. They've enlarged them to include women. They've enlarged them to include African Americans. And even, the Japanese after the World War II internment camps and stuff. So,
okay. I'm not disagreeing with you at all in that respect.
Well, right, right.
So what exactly are you getting at with the? So where are we going with this? Let me ask you that.
Well, I just want people to know that there is a difference between the unalienable natural rights that Jefferson was talking about in the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Civil Rights that we have in the Constitution, and the fact that because the government does control them through legislation, that we do in fact have to fight for these rights. They can in fact be taken, whereas again a natural right can't be taken unless you rip out somebody's voice box. You can't take their natural right to speak. Now you can impose consequences on their natural right to speak like they do in China, but unless you physically rip out somebody's voice box, you cannot take their right to speak. So but the right to vote, you could take that away, and they do all the time, as for people that have broken the law, or felons. They take rights away from people like that. You've heard the term civilly dead,
right?
Right. So
the issue that I have here though is that you referenced Jefferson and his point in the Declaration about unalienable rights. The thing is that what are they? Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Well, life, those are unalienable rights that you say, but we know that those things have limitations, do they not? And if you're going to say that they don't, or that those are natural rights, life, liberty, and property, then what exactly is there to restrict any of the, from somebody from doing what they want that infringes upon another's rights? So what I'm saying is,
wouldn't you say that like?
Let me put it this way. Let me put it this way. You're saying the issue is that you are saying that life, liberty, pursuit of happiness is unalienable. Well, how are we defining that And are those absolute? If you're saying that they're absolute, then there would be no means of being able to incarcerate somebody for committing a crime because that person has an absolute right to liberty. So, and obviously being incarcerated.
Right.
Go ahead.
And to be honest with you, Artie, I've never read any kind of legal authority on natural law and natural rights that ever said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is a natural right. I'm
sorry. Then maybe I'm mistaken because you mentioned Thomas Jefferson's words, and I thought you were making the connection between unalienable rights and natural rights as one and the same.
Well, no, what I was saying there, and I forgot even where I was going on that one, but inalienable and natural rights sure are the same thing. But even though Thomas Jefferson said that, and I kind of would agree that life is an inalienable right. I mean, obviously someone could take your life, but that has nowhere, I think, in the history of mankind, except by our rulers, been okay to do. But liberty is, again, I would think an inalienable right. I don't think slavery is, part of a right. I would think that on the flip side of the coin, liberty would be the right rather than slavery, as a, just as a default position, I guess you could say. But the pursuit of happiness and even, property, it would be kind of iffy, I mean, yeah, you would have the right to property. If we were back in the Stone Man days and you picked up a stone, would you have the right to keep that stone? So, that's kind of a little bit deeper on that issue there than I wanted to get, but.
Well, I think where we're going is at the end of the day, we can say that, X, Y, and Z are a natural right, but, as you already alluded to, they can be restricted ultimately because, the only way we're going to be able to protect those inalienable rights, as the framers and as the founding fathers had alluded to, is through making sure that the system of government that we put in place has limitations on its power. And that's what the Constitution is intended to do. So, but you're saying that because that Constitution exists, they have converted the inalienable rights into civil rights that can be restricted. And while I would agree with you to a certain extent, because as you know, there are limitations on what's in the First Amendment, the entire premise behind the Constitution is to restrict the extent and the breadth of which those limitations can be placed, or the limitations can be enforced by government. And I don't know of any other system, or at least, any other better system that we would have in place that could best protect those natural rights, those inalienable rights.
No, absolutely. I mean, I 100% agree. We are at the pinnacle of society in the history of mankind. We are the freest plantation on the planet. But I mean, I just want people to understand really that we're still a plantation. We're still free range cows. And we still have, just like James Kent said, I believe it was 1826's law book, that we, even though we're called freemen and citizens, we're still as subjugated to the government as the Englishman or the Spaniard or anybody else that's under a government. We are still subjected to their word, their rule, their law. And again, that's because we've chosen to be a part of the society. Again, this is the best society.
If we chose to be a part of it, how could you possibly compare it to a plantation?
What do you mean?
You said that we're still under a plantation where herded cows, even though, as you just stated, we chose to be part of it.
Right, absolutely. I mean, if there's 5 plantations, okay, in your area, and you're on the best plantation, would you move?
I'm sorry.
If you're in an area, there's 5 plantations around you, and you're born on the best plantation, would you move?
I'm not sure I
Or would
really
you-
understand the
or would you
comparison
choose-
here.
Would you choose to stay at that plantation, or would you move given the chance to a lesser plantation?
Again, are you comparing our civil society to a slave plantation, regardless of the fact that we can choose our own masters?
Absolutely.
Okay, I think we're gonna probably have to disagree with that there, because I mean, I don't recall any time in a deep South where the slaves could can elect to overthrow their masters or to vote for some new master for them. But yeah.
Okay, so I'm not talking about one individual person. The election of a president is not going to change civil society here. So basically, what I'm saying is the members of the society, the citizens, are subjected to whatever the government decrees is in the public good and the public will and the public welfare. Is that correct or not?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
The citizens of any society, America, China, Russia, Iran, wherever, they are subjugated to whatever the government they live under decrees as law, rule. Is that correct?
The whatever the government decrees as law as created by legislatures who are chosen by the people. The people choose the the people. Okay, I'm sorry. The people choose the legislatures through elections in our current system of government. We choose who is the head of the executive, in whether it be municipal, state, or federal. And then, yes, as part of that choice, we are then obligated to adhere to the laws that are passed and enforced by those elected leaders of said government that the people had chosen.
Okay, so basically, you
seem to think that the government's decree, as you say it, is not subject to any sort of check, or you seem to imply that.
Okay, when the general public was 80% against the bank bailouts, what did the government decree?
I'm sorry, 80% of what? Like,
remember when the banks got bailed out and 80% of the population was against bailing out the banks?
80.
Do you remember that?
I remember that in 2009 during the crisis, people were very upset about the bank bailouts. Yes.
Okay, so are you telling me that whatever the general public wants is what the government gives us? Or is it the government that gives it to the citizens?
The government, the elected leaders of government operated within their duties to, or within their powers that have been given to them by Congress through already established legislation to do what they did, even if they're elected leaders, right? So they can do that even if to the public ire of the people. But then what happened after that? There was a massive wave in the elections subsequent, where a lot of members of Congress were voted out of office as a direct result of that action of the dealing with the bank bailouts. So they were held to account as a result of doing something that was very unpopular with the general populace.
Really? Okay. I just have a different economic view, but that's fine. So basically here, what I'm saying is that the citizens, regardless of how the laws are passed or whatever, if we agree with them or not, I mean, it's nice to say we elect these people. Some people think there might be election fraud going on. There's been talk about it for 100 years, whatever have you not. But whatever way that the laws get passed, that we are subjugated to those laws because we're members of society. And again, it's not something I think is bad. It's not something I'm saying shouldn't be there. I'm just saying that this is our reality. And right now, as an American citizen, we're paying roughly between state, local, federal taxes, fines, fees, licenses, registrations. We're paying about 60% of our income right now, and government fees and fines, taxes and stuff. So right now we're sitting at about 27-28 trillion dollars in debt. Interest rates only at about what, 1%. So
I
give
wish.
it another 5 or 10. Yeah. The government give them another 5 or 10 years, and you're looking at another $10 trillion. So what I'm saying is, in 10-15 years, my daughter's going to be paying what, 70-75% of her income and government taxes, fines, and fees. At what point, Artie, do you say this is slavery? Is it when your grandkids are paying 90% of their income to pay for the debt and the taxes and the fees? Or at what point do we stop living and working for ourselves and just living and working to pay for the government?
Well, I mean, even in a state like New Jersey, I don't think 60% of my income is going to the state. A lot of it, and by state I mean state, local, state, federal taxes. But beside the point, I don't know if I would ever compare any level of taxation to slavery, but because I am well aware of what slavery actually was, and I'm not going to compare my financial issues that I have with the state to that practice. But your idea is the problem. If the problem that you're having is with the level of taxation, I think the problem is that you won't redressing your government if you have that as an issue. Part of that issue is being active in ensuring that you aren't being further taxed by either property taxes by your local government, as it is in here in New Jersey, by being active in local government, active in state government, active in federal government, to ensure that you aren't being taxed to the level that you are. So it involves activism in that sense. I don't think that going into a city hall is really going to change whether or not how often you're being taxed. So you're asking me a general question about taxation, and yeah, we can have a debate on the level of taxation that's appropriate or not. And I would even agree with you that our current level of taxation is not the best, because who the hell likes paying taxes? But you're asking me a general question of how much is too much. Yeah, there probably is a limitation on how much is too much. If I can't feed myself anymore because all of my my income is going towards the taxes, then yeah, I'm going to have a problem. But you're asking me a general question about taxes, so there's my answer.
Okay. Well, I was just again wondering at what level of taxation you would feel that your freedom would be gone at. Now, and again, I didn't just mean taxes. Of course, I meant not federal, state income taxes, like some of the people in the chat thought. I was, there's all kinds of taxes, from gasoline tax to cell phone tax to whatever tax. There's also licensing, fines, fees. If you got a boat, you got to license it. You got to do all that. You know what I'm saying? So for most Americans, altogether, money going towards government is about 60% of their income right now, and I can't see that slowing down anytime soon with the rate of level that they're borrowing at, and again, just interest rates on borrowing going up to 9 or 10%. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but and I wasn't that old, but I remember that back in the late 70s they were up to like 17-19% interest rates. So we're already paying like 500 billion on our debt now. So, and that's at a low percentage interest rate. So if it just jacked up to 9 or 10%, which isn't unreasonable historically, then you're looking at $2 to $3 trillion interest payment per year when we're not even taking in but 2.5, maybe $3.5 trillion a year, the United States government. So, I mean, these are real issues I think that need to be addressed. And part of the way I address them is I take my camera out and I go in these public spaces and make these public record requests, and every little bit counts. It just might be a secretary that's stealing staples over here or whatever, but when you times that across, however municipalities are across America, and we keep hearing these stories, they keep coming out in the news, but they're always, reactive. They're always after something has happened, never before something happens. And I'm just tired of depending on the government to watch the government. It's sort of, I guess, in my mind, logically equivalent to the mafia investigating the mafia. So
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
I had a.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't know you finished.
Well, no, I was gonna say I had a good conversation with you. I didn't know when you wanted to cut it off, but
Well, I mean, I wanted to make sure you were able to say what you wanted to say. My answer to that is I'm not really seeing the connection between taxes are too damn high, and then I'm going to redress it by taking my video camera out and go annoy a local lady at your county clerk's office for no reason, when she probably has nothing to do with the amount of taxes and that you're paying at the moment, and probably has no power to affect the amount of taxes that you're paying at that moment because she works at a county clerk's office. So I think it might, if the issue that we're having is the amount of taxation, and again, I'm not disagreeing that I pay a lot of taxes, especially here in New Jersey. I don't think the proper avenue to have that changed is by going to your county clerk's office and recording and continuing to record when she asks you not to.
Okay, so here's a perfect example. Me and another buddy were out last year. We found out while we were out recording that a agency of a local government had spent overtime money on their employees creating a gingerbread house contest that was just applicable to them. You know what I mean? It was like an indoor in-house kind of contest for gingerbread houses, and they didn't want to do it on the clock, so they ended up paying them overtime, okay, to do that. So would you say that me going there and finding that out, would that be a good way to help curb the tax money coming out of our pockets?
I mean, I think that would
like that.
That would be the perfect example to get a public records request for salary and overtime information, right?
Yes, we did.
Then that's actually that's the whole point of those public records laws is that's part of the issue. That's something completely separate than taking your video camera out into the public space, into the public building, right?
Well, no, because a lot of times when you go to the government, and I don't know if you read any Google reviews of any municipalities, but because I audit and I go to a lot of municipalities, the way I do it is when I plan out my trip, I go to Google Maps and I look at the public buildings on the Google Maps, and they always come with reviews just like any other business. And usually I'm used to seeing 1 to 2 stars at most municipalities for most of their agencies. And what I tend to find is that because the citizens naturally are forced to use these services, if you're a resident of Chicago, Illinois, and you got to go through the Chicago Power and Water or whatever. So if you live there, you're pretty much forced. There's no other where to go to get these services. And these people that work there realize that, so they don't have to treat you kindly. You know what I mean? They don't have to give you a smile when you come in and say, "Hey, Mr. Artie, how are you today?" They could be like, "Whatever, Artie, you got your freaking money, and if you don't, I'm going to shut your power off." You know what I mean? Like these people have become too comfortable in their jobs, treating the people who are forced to pay their salaries through taxes, and they're treating us like shit.
I mean, I don't know if I would say that. I mean, in my experience, most of the time when I deal with local clerks, they've been pretty cordial to me.
Well, of course, we know not to take like our general experience as something to base a theory
Well,
on.
that
Because
sounds like
that's a
something that
small
you are making a you're making a general assumption that all public workers are, do nothing assholes that aren't going to give you the time of day.
Well, I didn't say that at all. I just said that at most municipalities that you'll look at, you'll see that there's a lower level of service compared to a private business.
And then my response to that is, public records laws help alleviate that. Being active in your local municipality also helps with that. Oftentimes, I think a lot of people don't realize just how little people are active in their local government, and then they don't realize what's going on until it's too late, and they find out that the city officials have been doing nothing because nobody's being active in that regard. My point, and that's the thing that I think we're almost in agreement, but I think we have a distinct difference in how we are trying to hold public officials to account. My bit would be focusing primarily on public records access, being active in your local government, and being active in your local government, potentially saying, "Hey, I'm going to help, elect somebody else who's going to be doing a better job than you," and hold, public workers to account when they're not doing their jobs correctly, or they're not giving me the level of service that I think I deserve as a taxpayer. Versus, going out to your camera in the public building, and where the only extent of what you're doing is is getting a rise out of a public official who is already going to be in a bad mood because they're being recorded when for no reason then other than being recorded, and then when the person doesn't stop when asked to, they're going to be in a salty mood.
Okay, well let me ask this, because what you just said there, I just want to flip it around real quick about people being recorded, and them not wanting to be recorded for no other reason than being recorded. Is it okay for our government to record everything we do?
No.
But they do that, correct?
Is the government recording me right now in my own home?
I mean, I don't know if they've got any kind of like carnivore program running on YouTube or anything like that, or I'm not very tech savvy, but and again,
Well,
I don't know if it's just
last I
labeled
checked, they
to
do
get-
need a warrant if they want to search my house, or if they want to tap my house.
they need
So
to
the government cannot. So the government cannot record anything that I do in anything I do in my own home.
right. Okay. And what about like Google? Is Google allowed to record you in your home? Like, let's say Alexa or your phone.
With my
Is that able
consent.
to monitor you?
With my consent,
Right, because you had to buy the product, right?
and I made agreements to it, and they also, many of them, give me the option to turn on certain privacy controls. But
Right, right.
I made agreements saying that, okay, you can take my information.
Okay, so basically, what I'm getting at here in this age of surveillance, could you give me a logical explanation why somebody wouldn't want to be recorded unless they're doing something wrong? Could you give me a reason why they wouldn't want to be recorded when they're already being recorded, even as I'm recording them?
Because that person doesn't know you, and they don't know why you're recording them. Because when they're being recorded by their own employer, they agreed to do that. They agreed to that situation. They didn't agree to be recorded by you.
But they agreed to follow all the laws that the legislatures and the courts in that passed, correct?
Yes, and those laws sometimes allow those public buildings to be to have restrictions on audio and video recording by members of the general public.
Did the courts say that there's no privacy in public?
Depends on what. Well, it depends on what you define as public.
An area where someone can overhear what you're saying.
I feel like that's a little bit too broad to be defined as a public area, because my own workplace can be a public place if that's the case. People can overhear me talking.
Right. So somebody overheard you talking, let's say, I don't know, let's say you were going to commit fraud or something, and they called the police on you, and would they be held liable in any way if you weren't going to commit fraud, or even if you did commit fraud, would there be any liability on their behalf? For eavesdropping,
For eavesdropping?
wiretapping. Yeah,
For-
eavesdropping, wiretapping. We have a wiretapping law here in Florida. So,
Right.
like, you're not allowed to audio and record people in a private setting. So, you're saying at your work, which I'm guessing maybe is like an open vestibule area where you can hear people in the next vestibule. If I was recording in the next vestibule and I caught your conversation, would I be prosecutable under the Wiretap Act?
I wouldn't know. I don't know what the Wiretap Act is in the state of Florida.
Well, I mean, let's say in your area, let's say in your state,
I honestly couldn't tell. I don't. My limitation on the wiretapping incidents is I have a limited knowledge on wiretapping, so I'm not going to give an opinion on that.
Okay. Well, basically, I think the gist of it is that if you're where other people can hear you, that it wouldn't be considered a private area. Like a private area would be like an office where you could shut the door, and it would just be you two talking, or like a bathroom has been obviously ruled to be a private area. But if you're in a public lobby, like let's say I'm in the police lobby, okay, and I wander into the police lobby, and I gotta request a report for an arrest, and I don't have a camera or nothing with me. I'm just there by myself, and there's a lady there, and she's a sex crime victim, and the officer is taking her information there in the lobby, and I overhear that information, that personal information that I'm not supposed to hear. Would I be in trouble, or would the officer be in trouble?
You'd be in trouble.
I'd be in trouble because I overheard them.
Not because you overheard them. If you were recording it and you were if you recorded their conversation.
Well, I just said that I didn't have a recorder. I was just a regular citizen in there, and I overheard their information.
Then no, you wouldn't be liable.
Okay, but I would be liable if I recorded that information.
Yes.
Do you know what law that would actually be that I'd be liable for recording that?
Probably because if the police department has a restriction on audio and video recording in that lobby, that would be the law.
Mine doesn't.
Okay.
So what would I be in trouble for?
You wouldn't be in trouble probably unless you disseminated that information.
Okay. What about like Hipaa laws? Like the medical records law. Let's say I'm at a medical facility, and again I overhear some information, or even I record it. Let's say on my camera. Would I be liable under that? Even if I did disseminate that, I would be liable for that.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I couldn't answer that question.
All right. Okay. All right. The reason I was asking is because HIPAA specifically applies to medical personnel and their, people that they farm work out to, like labs and stuff. There's no actual obligation on me to keep someone's medical history private, So if I'm walking down the road and I see your medical file there and I pick it up and I read it and then I take it and I broadcast it on YouTube, there's no law against that. For
probably not.
To broadcast that information.
Yeah, it may there. I wouldn't know. I don't think it would be under HIPAA. I mean, you'd probably be considered an asshole for doing something like that. But I don't know if I can't think of anything off the top of my head that would say that it's inherently illegal. I suppose it would depend on the jurisdiction that you're in. But you would probably be judged in the court of public opinion for sure if you decided that you were going to disseminate somebody's personal medical information.
Right, that's something I would never do. I was just using it as a hypothesis there. But all right. Well, I mean,
that's what I thought, Deacon. I saw Deacon in the chat. She's a former law enforcement, and that's what I thought. I'm sure there are actual privacy laws that could get you in trouble. for disseminating certain information, it just wouldn't be under HIPAA. It would be probably under something else.
Be under something else.
Yeah, because as you alluded to, HIPAA is restricted for medical personnel and vendors handling medical information, and not to the general public. But I think the issue here is, as we allude to, our ultimate discussion is, again, whether or not well, I think we kind of established that governments, local and state, federal, have the power, have the authority to regulate the conduct that goes on in their buildings, up to and including restricting the usage of audio and video devices on public property. I think we. So, I mean, I understand that if you disagree with that on a philosophical level, I can understand that. But I think the issue is whether or not they actually have that authority to do that, and I think they do. Now, given whether or not you violated that in a specific circumstance is dependent upon the jurisdiction that you're in, whether it's a local office, state office, federal office, and the type of category of office that you're in, etc. That can vary. I mean, I think we also established that as well. So I think the other discussion that we would have is, or excuse me. So I think let me just rewind. I think that's where we kind of have that common understanding. Is that right? On what the government can and can't restrict.
Well, I do agree that the government can restrict actions, but not lawful actions. And again, I've already beat 2 cases here in Florida. I got one in Alabama and one in Georgia. But I do believe that the press, be it with a pad or with a video camera, has the right to enter public buildings, public spaces, and collect content on what their public officials do. Again, I've already beat 2 cases down here in Florida, and I'm looking to beat some more cases, one in Alabama, Pritchard. The other one I just acquired in Paulding County, Georgia, but I will eventually make it to all the states. I've been in about 8 or 9 so far. A lot
you're
of people seem to...
I'm sorry, what do you, just to clarify, what do you say you beat in cases? You mean like criminal trespass charges?
Yes.
Okay. Now, have you ever filed suit against public officials?
Well, I have 2 suits going now from my lawyer here in Tampa, for the unlawful arrest at Orange County Jail and the unlawful arrest at the Tampa port. But I have pro se'd a couple lawsuits, and again, I'm no lawyer, so I've lost more than I've won. But it's a learning experience for me. I just do the lawsuits where there's simple violations like an unlawful detainment, forcing me to ID under threat of arrest, that kind of stuff. So I'm just trying to learn as I go with that.
Well, I was curious because I did see one of your lawsuits that you filed against Hines. I think she was a administrator for county, and
for DeSoto County.
Correct. And I did see that the court had gave you leave to amend your complaint, but I don't think you responded to it, and then they granted the motion to dismiss. And the reason I'm bringing it up is not to bring it up that you lost the case, but only I was curious whether or not you had read the judge's decision on granting the motion to dismiss, because I thought that the judge provided some useful information as to the specific issue that we're discussing here, and that is the fundamental right to record public officials in a public, in a non-public forum. And the judge himself said that, the case law on this specific issue is actually fairly sparse. There isn't a whole lot that the court has been able to go on. And even then, the court had to look at a separate case that had been decided, in conjunction with yours, where the judge went to, well, if the judge, if the lawyers for both parties, plaintiff and defendant in that case, because the action in the case that the judge cited was another, what sounded to me was another auditor who was disputing the ordinance that Punta Gordo.
Yeah, I know
she
exactly what you were talking about. The Ian McGuire injunction
yes.
down in Fort Myers. And then what the judge said in that, which was interesting, and we're going to actually use it because we're going back to Punta Gorda, was that his right wasn't violated because he was not restricted from filming in the building. He was restricted from recording people without their consent.
Right.
She said it's perfectly legal for him to go into the building and film, just when he was recording somebody and they did not consent, that he was not allowed to do that. So even again, in that case, the judge has stated it's legal for us to go in these buildings and record, but without consent.
It was based on the interpretation of the ordinance itself, because the ordinance was specifically tailored that you had to have consent, or you cannot record somebody else without their consent. The judge was looking at the text of the ordinance.
Right, which again, as you know, there's no privacy in public, which would, totally nullify that. So you again, it's not the fact that unconstitutional laws are passed, because they get passed all the time. It's just when the citizens take it up and have them reviewed that they become unconstitutional and then they get thrown out. So we're still working on it and we're still looking at it. But to imagine that, the right to free press hinges on the consent of those we're trying to bring to the attention of the public is just ridiculous on its face.
Again, you're trying to make the one-to-one connection between free press and recording, audio and visual recording.
Right, because as a member of the press, that's how I gather my content.
Okay, but that's also a device. That's also a tool. And as a member of the press, you can also have other means of being able to document activities of public officials.
Right.
Which kind of goes back to the first half of this discussion.
Right, but and I'm sure you would agree that under the free press, there, as far as I know, maybe you know different, but there are no restrictions on what the free press can use, what tool the free press can use in order to gather their content.
I believe the free press still has to gain authorization to record in certain spaces, in certain public spaces.
Right, like the White House, the Pentagon,
courthouses.
Obviously, right, situations like that. But again, these are places, again, that are not open generally to the public. I mean, if the public just can't wander into the White House, the public can't just wander into the Pentagon, they can't wander into the jail cell to interview a prisoner. But if the door is open and the public's allowed to walk in there,
if the public is allowed to walk in there, you are assuming that because of that, then you have the unfettered right to record whatever you see.
From a public space, yeah, the plain view doctrine.
The plain view doctrine has. Okay, what do you mean by plain view doctrine? I think I remember you using that before.
Basically, anywhere you're legally allowed to stand, anything that you can see is able to be recorded. Like if I'm standing on the sidewalk and
go in and look into a public building.
Look anywhere. Look into a house that has its blinds open. If there's some lady in her living room dancing around naked with her blinds open, and I'm on the sidewalk and I'm legally allowed to be there, then I'm legally allowed to record whatever I can see.
Okay, I do know that you do know that there are Peeping Tom laws, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
So I guess you find Peeping Tom laws to be unconstitutional?
No, not at all. There's a
you literally just described being a Peeping Tom.
Absolutely, no, I did not.
You said that if a woman is inside her house dancing half naked and you are outside looking in the window, you're saying that because you're out in public, you can record what she's doing.
Absolutely.
That is literally the definition of a peeping Tom.
That meets the elements of the Peeping Tom, so it wouldn't have nothing to do with creeping around the curtilage of the house or anything of that nature. It says specifically that a peeping Tom is an innocent citizen walking by, maybe recording his neighborhood, who turns around and sees a lady naked in her window. He's now a peeping Tom. That's what the
You can be
that's
charged
the
with
element.
that. Yes, because what you're looking and recording what's going on where in somebody's home where somebody has the reasonable expectation of privacy, regardless of whether their blinds are open or not.
Really? So what about
Yes.
like a backyard? What about like a backyard? Let's say it's a backyard. They got a 6-foot privacy fence. Neighbors laying out there naked, sunbathing, and my second story home, I could see right in there. I record that.
Yeah.
That's peeping Tom.
Yes.
Oh my God, dude! You know how many celebrities got peeping Tom charges against the press?
Are you seriously trying to make that that distinction between the press, the celebrities, and the paparazzi?
I'm trying to say that whatever you can see where you're legally allowed to be is not something that you can be charged with. People have to create their own privacy. Have you ever heard that? Create your own privacy?
Yes, and I've also seen that it's still BS when it comes to people who are in their houses and have the reasonable expectation, or on their property and have a reasonable expectation of privacy that their actions aren't going to be recorded.
How would you have a reasonable expectation of privacy if you left your blinds open?
I'm still within the confines of my own home.
Would that seem reasonable to you that what you were doing is private and couldn't be seen by anyone in public?
Yes. I fully expect that somebody's not going to record me. Don't care if I am freebirding all over my house with the blinds open. I still expect that somebody's not going to start recording me because I'm in my own house. I'm within my own property. That is literally the purpose of the Peeping Tom laws, is intended to protect.
Okay.
Because
Perhaps I'm wrong.
with all due respect, this is just reminding me of an Auditor video of a guy who decided that he was going to record the interior of a battered woman's shelter.
No, I would think that's a little bit different, but
Well, how so? The windows were completely open and exposed, and the guy decided that he's going to stand on a public sidewalk and record the interior through the window of a battered woman's shelter. But he said that that's okay because, as you said, they got to create their own privacy by closing the blinds.
Well, right, and legally he's absolutely correct, which is why he didn't get charged with Peeping Tom Laws.
He was threatened that if he didn't leave, he's going to be arrested under the Peeping Tom laws.
Right. If they actually had a case against him, they would have arrested him right there.
They gave him the chance. The cops decided to be cordial and give him the chance to walk away.
I find that hard to believe, speaking since it was about Glenn and the cops there hate him. But I digress. But so basically, if I leave my windows open and someone records in me, I can then call the police on them for peeping Toms because it was their fault that I left the windows open and I was naked in front of them.
No, it was their fault that they decided to record the interior of my house.
And they can't do that, right? So like if I was a cop and I was outside looking inside your house, that would be illegal if I saw something, right?
Yes.
Like if there was pot on the dresser and I looked in and I saw that wouldn't be probable cause, right?
No, it wouldn't be. It would not be probable cause for a cop to go into somebody else's property without any basis whatsoever, decide to look through it, see something going on, and then go ahead and arrest you. No, a cop can't do that.
Okay, so let me put the scenario a little bit better. So there's a front porch. There's the door. Right next to it's a big picture window. Cop comes up to knock on the door. No one answers. He looks through the open window. There's a pound of pot on the table there. Is that probable cause or not?
No.
Okay. I just thought that was the plain view doctrine, but I could be wrong.
You can't. The cop can't go in there and go confiscate the pot and then arrest somebody there. The plain. Yeah, I don't think that's what the plain view doctrine is about. But even then, but even then, the point making here is, you know, the plain view doctrine is something that's completely separate from Peeping Tom Laws. So I don't even know why you segued into that, other than to say, well, other than to try to make the illusion that because the cops can do it, so then why can't I?
Well, it's based on the same premise that, again, anything where you're legally allowed to be standing at and you can see, then you can film, you can record. I mean, that's the whole thing out there in LA with the paparazzi. You know, that's why the movie stars got 12-foot fences, because, you know, they can't put a ladder up against the fence to climb up and get a shot of. But back in the day, they could walk by with a camera on a selfie stick or whatever and lift it up 7 feet and take pictures, and that was perfectly legal.
Who said it was perfectly legal for them to do that?
I believe the courts. I mean, I've never seen it.
I would love to see that that case, to be perfectly honest. To say that if somebody has the ability to raise a camera above an 8-foot fence, that somehow that homeowner has lost their individual right to privacy, or their reasonable expectation of privacy.
Sure, absolutely.
So I would love to see the litigation on that. The thing is, the ultimate reality is that, again, I do not think that you have. I'm sorry. The Peeping Tom Laws are there for a reason. I think in New Jersey they're explicitly called the Peeping Tom Laws, and that includes, and it's irrelevant whether or not the blinds are open or closed. When you are inside your own home, you have an implicit, reasonable expectation of privacy, which is something that people, you know, that's a Fourth Amendment issue that people have, the Fourth Amendment right. And even if it's a private individual who's trying to peer in, you still have a reasonable expectation of privacy within your own home. And if you don't, then we've all lost any semblance of a reasonable expectation of privacy, because, you know, what's private then?
Well, wouldn't private be like in your own home with your shades drawn? Wouldn't that be considered private?
I don't think it would. I don't think it should matter whether or not my shades are open or drawn, because I could be having the shades open just to let in more light, not for people to go look in and see what's going on. Right?
Right.
I mean, I can have my blinds open for a myriad of reasons that has nothing to do with wanting people to go check and see what's going on. And when I'm in my own home, I'm not going to have here and sit and say that I've lost my ability to do whatever the fuck I want in my own home, be that whether that's doing a home exercise or running around naked chasing after my cat. You know, that's what I'm doing in my own home is my own business. And if I have the shades open because I want to use more light and not use up more, I don't want to use as much electricity, I think I still have that reasonable expectation of privacy that somebody's not going to record me.
Okay, well, I just so happened to Google something real quick while we were talking here, and it says there's a case here. You could look it up. It says a New York City gallery, Julie Saul in Chelsea, is showing pictures taken through the windows of people's apartments. The photograph, Arnie Sev's son, he took pictures from his second-story apartment across the street from the six-story zinc building located at 475 Greenwich Street. Yeah, so there are cases out there. I don't know it doesn't say what the outcome of this case was. Yeah, I'll have to look into it more, but yeah, I'm pretty sure I remember a case where it said, you got your windows open. There's no expectation of privacy.
Okay, I mean, I would love to see that. But I even recall that what was it that the Scalia was involved in that case. The cops tried to oh, that's right. It was a the there was a lot of, I remember that it was a Fourth Amendment case where there was an issue with planes flying overhead and locating a weed farm from there, and that was considered, and they didn't have like any sort of warrant, and that was ruled an unconstitutional Fourth Amendment breach because they doesn't they had to have a warrant. Just because the entirety of the property isn't completely covered doesn't mean that they still don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, we got each other's email address, so we can definitely send that back and forth.
No, I agree. I think that'd be perfectly fine if we're able to find something that that speaks to this issue. I just happen to be on the idea that my home is my home, and I shouldn't be beholden to being wary of some who may or may not be recording outside of my window in my own home, when I feel like I'm supposed to be expected to be, perfectly fine being able to do what I want without somebody who I'd never gave consent to decides that they're going to look into my room and look into my house,
Right. Yeah, I'm looking at a case now, but I'm not getting to the meat of the matter here. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I'd like to uh, dive into more. But yeah, it's a little late, so I have to get off here. But I wanted to thank you, sir, for having me on. I had a good conversation with you. So
Sure. No, I think we had a decent conversation. We were able to be cordial and productive, and at least find an understanding, right?
absolutely.
Kalo versus U.S. That's what I mean. Thank you, Jolene, in the chat. Kalo versus U.S. That was and that involved the police using infrared camera, and they used an infrared camera to detect the heat lamps for the guy's marijuana, I guess greenhouse or what have you, and that was considered a Fourth Amendment breach because you have that absolute Fourth Amendment expectation of privacy, and just because you're using an infrared camera doesn't absolve that expectation. But thank you, Jolene, in the chat. Anyway, but thank you again for coming in. Maybe we can have a follow-up discussion, and of course we'll keep in touch and kind of share our information with each other. So,
Okay.
yep. Thanks for
Well,
coming on,
sir.
man. Yeah.
You got it, bud.
Take
Have
care.
a good night.
You too.
Yep.
Anyway, what's up, guys? Let me move the chat right here. So, yep. Yes. By the way, guys, I'll be on Schrodinger's channel on Thursday. He offered to have me on so we can discuss, tonight's discussion. I think it was good. We obviously have disagreements on certain aspects of the law, certainly in terms of privacy rights and the access to public spaces. So look for me there. Yes, there's a reason why I have my desktop on this. Because, after Schrodinger's event on Thursday, you are probably not going to see me on this channel for at least a week and a half, because I'll be playing and streaming nothing but Cyberpunk 2077 starting tomorrow at 7 o'clock Eastern on my channel. I'll be streaming Cyberpunk 2077, and I probably will not stop for about 24 hours because I was able to take off work. Yes, I took off work for video game. Fight me. So look for me there on Thursday at 7 o'clock on Schrodinger, or 6 o'clock on Schrodinger's channel, and I will check you guys then. And I appreciate you guys, all your support. Oh God, before I forget, super chats. I saw them, I didn't see them. Oh yeah, Schrodinger with $2. I'm here by special appearance only. Sean Hawkins, who decided to give me a jump scare in the middle of a fecking conversation, but it's only my fault because I forgot to turn that off. Please ask him how many written evaluations has he presented to anybody he audits, and how many follow-up reports has he filed with the Public Liaison Office. Thank you. It's a good question. I think that we kind of alluded to that in our idea of how, what's the best way of holding public officials accountable. I'm all in favor of transparency, oversight, and, that's why we have, transparency laws in place, and why, especially with policing, why we're trying to do better in terms of having better transparency for policing and, holding to account police misconduct when it happens. So I agree in that respect. I don't know if you're really going to get the same ROI by just walking up to random clerk's offices and just, recording the receptionist there, who probably has not said a mean thing to you at all and is just trying to do her job. $5 and another $5 from Schrodinger's cat. At least Rogue Nation showed up. He's not a coward like Rowdy Podcast. Yeah, you know what? He showed up. He did not. And we were able to have a conversation. We obviously disagreed, but we were able to talk to each other. So hopefully we can have it again. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the support. So glad to have you guys on. And like I said, see me on Schrodinger. If not, look for me tomorrow at 7 o'clock on my other channel. Thanks, guys. Have a good night. Take care. Yeah. Oh, God, what am I doing? No! Ah. There you go.
A pimp, not a simp. A pimp, not a simp. We eat so many shrimp. I got iodine partners.
My bitch a choosy lover, never fuck without a rubber. Never in the sheets like it on top of the cover. Money on the dresser, drive a compressor. Top notch hoes, get the most, not the lesser. Trash like the buck for $40 in the club. Fucking up the game, bitch, it gets no love. She be cross country, giving all that she got. 1,000 a pop, I'm pulling business off the lot. I smashed up the gray one, bought me a red. Every time we hit the parking lot, we turn head. Some hoes wanna choose, but them bitches too scary. Your bitch chose me, you ain't a pimp, you a fairy.
A pimp, not a simp. A pimp, not a simp. A pimp, not a simp. We eat so many shrimp. I got iodine partners.
Baby, you been rolling solo, time to get down with the team. The grass is greener on that other side, if you know what I mean. I show you shit you never seen, the 7 wonders of the world. And I can make you the 8th if you wanna be my girl. I say my girl, I don't mean my woman, that ain't my style. Need a real street stalker, walk a green mile. You piling up the paper on the dining room table, cause you able to realize I'm the truth and not a fable. Baby, rockin' Russian sable, keep that chiller on the rack. What I look like with some $1,000 shit up on my back. I'm $1 million man, they need $1 billion bitch. Put my pimpin' in your life, watch your daddy get rich. Easy as ABC, simple as 1, 2, 3. Get down with UGK, Pimp CBU with B. Cause what's a hoe with no pimp, and what's a pimp with no hoe? Don't be a lame, you know the game and how it goes. We try to get toes.
A pimp, not a simp. A pimp, not a simp. A pimp, not a simp. We eat so many shrimp. I got iodine partners.